Democrats want to give $10 billion more to universities in their new HEROES Act, and there is no provision whatsoever in the HEROES Act to exclude these funds from schools like Harvard, who have about $40 billion in endowment money sitting in the bank. Just imagine how much that would be if Hillary was in charge right now, instead of Trump and his very trusty veto pen. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated about the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we're talking about college bailouts as Democrats look to give another $10 billion on top of what they've already given to universities in virus aid funding to universities all across the country. And, you know, when you think about the money they're spending on universities in this new Nancy Pelosi-driven HEROES Act, and again, they rammed this through the Congress. Most of them weren't even there. All proxy voting, right? They ram this through Congress. It's staggering the money they're throwing around, right? They're spending billions and billions and trillions of dollars, literally, on all sorts of things that are Democrat wish lists. They want to do ballot harvesting in every state. They want to require all voting now become mail voting. Voting by mail. It is staggering. And the good news is that it's dead on arrival. I mean, it's not, even if the Republican Senate, traitors like Mitt Romney decide to vote for it, there's no way it's getting past Trump's veto pen. But it shows you something. The universities themselves are part of this hallowed list of Democrat priorities, right? This is where your money's going to go, no matter whether it's well used or not.
So the HEROES Act, as it's called, the Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions Act. Ooh, that's just warms the cockles of my heart right there. The HEROES Act, it would allocate specifically, as we're talking about the universities, $10.15 billion to U.S. colleges and forgive up to, don't forget this part, $10,000 in those student loan debts for those private borrowers. So if you're a college kid, you're like, woo, let's pass this, $10,000.
Didn't the first one take money away from?
They were trying to
they
do
didn't
all
get that
stuff. I don't think that actually had it in it. But, you know, all the universities got their grubby hands on what they were allowed to, even the Harvards of the world who, you know, have how many billions in endowment, and then they're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't take that.
Let's let that sink in for a second. You get $1,200 check if you're a working stiff. If you're a kid who borrowed too much money for a crappy degree in women's studies, you get $10,000.
Yeah.
In other words, as is always the case with progressives, you punish those who have failed, and you punish those who succeed, and you reward those who have failed, right?
Well, of course, that's
what they do.
That's just how we roll here in 2020 coronavirus land of America. So we already know that the CARES Act, and that was the Coronavirus Aid, Recovery, and Economic Security Act. See, I just love how they come up with all these lovely names for these bills to make it just sound like you cares. Well, that allocated billions of dollars already, as we said. And we already know that Harvard has more than $40 billion, and other universities, along with Harvard, who had these large endowments, basically got blasted by any of conservative media being like, excuse me, you're taking all this money, and you already have all this money. So they're also saying that they would, you know, not take it. So if this would pass, which I don't think it will, this $10.15 billion. I wonder what would then happen with those bigger institutions.
Well, the snooty little private school that Barack Obama sent his kids to, Sidwell and Friends, they got a big blast of money in the first round, and that's an incredibly wealthy school. The richest kids in the country go there, and they said they're not giving the money back. Just so you know. And another point of contention, and this is really shocking, with the previously passed CARES Act was whether the law allowed for financial assistance to be distributed to illegal immigrant students, as a half of the $14 billion was meant to be distributed directly to students by colleges. But Education Secretary Betsy DeVos later issued guidance, good for her, saying that illegal immigrant students were ineligible to receive any of this assistance. According to the House Committee on Appropriations, the new HEROES legislation overrides Betsy DeVos from being able to decide where the money goes. So not only are they going to pass this law, they are putting themselves over the Department of Education, where they get to say, hey, Betsy DeVos does not have the authority as the head education person in the country to turn around and decide where the money goes. We'll tell you where it goes, and it goes to illegal immigrants.
I must say, you're They're really being a dreamer about this whole thing.
Heroes.
Heroes.
I mean, can you imagine if we labeled this douches?
What would
right?
it stand for?
Dumb omnibus, right?
Universally.
Dumb. I mean,
or university.
It would take 2 seconds to put together an acronym like that. That would be much more appropriate.
Universally.
How about Pelosi? Petty, evil,
You're just
lunatic. It's fun.
It's got to have some sort of a verb.
That's the job I want in government. I want to be the guy who names everything.
Ooh.
I mean, they seem to have a hell of a lot of fun.
Well, they probably do. So, as you indicated before, though, it is pretty much DOA, dead on arrival. So we'll see if Mitch McConnell. I mean, what's going to happen now? Right.
Well,
we don't know with our politicians.
You know what's going to happen is that Nancy Pelosi did this knowing it would never pass, so that she could convince her radical left wing for a cohort across the country that they should vote for Biden, not for Bernie, right? The people who wanted Bernie, she went full socialist in this, right? So she's basically signaling to the left wingers who are angry and don't want to vote for Biden, she's signaling, look at what we're doing here. We are trying to get the most liberal, and that's why Biden this week has come out and made some really...
He came out? Oh, Biden. Oh.
Yes. He's like the woodchuck. Not woodchuck. What's the... See your shadow?
Groundhog.
The
Groundhog's Day.
Like the groundhog, Joe Biden came out and saw his shadow. So we've got 6 more weeks of obscurity coming from him. But the point being that this was all for show to shore up her left-wing base. Don't forget, Biden's gone full left, right? He appointed AOC to be his green commissar. So if you vote for Joe Biden and he becomes president, you're going to get Andrea Ocasio-Cortez in charge of your money to pay for global warming. And get ready to grab the ankles over that one.
Moving on to our next story, we know that millions of people right now are out of work. They're being furloughed. But the good news is after years of efforts against the administration, graduate assistants at Georgetown University have reached their first union agreement with the school for a significant pay raise and employment benefits. Woohoo for Georgetown grad students. Not really. Washington Post reported that the union contract benefits more than 1,000 employees by giving graduate student workers annual raises of at least 2%. Have you gotten a 2% raise anytime?
In the 27 years I've been a professor, I think I've gotten a 2% raise once. I've gotten 3 1% raises, and that's it.
Well, there you go. Well, master's program hourly workers are now set to earn 44% more per hour, and assistants in doctoral programs are going to see their annual stipends increase from $31,000 to $35,000. Now, when I was a grad student, I got $9,000 to teach my own class, and I was stoked about it. They are upset that they were only going to get $31,000. Heck, let's be honest. $31,000 is like,
man, 35.
You can live on that. Let's just put it that way.
I was probably 15, 20 years before you. I was teaching 3 classes a semester as a grad student, 3 classes a semester, and I was making about $11,000 a year. Yeah. And but what the numbers fail to tell you is that I didn't have to pay for my tuition.
That's the beauty of it, and that's why I am always against this. As someone who was a grad student assistant, you get your tuition paid for. You should just be happy with that.
You're going to give me $35,000 a year, then charge me for my schooling.
Or something. This is a stipend. So when you see it being a stipend, you know there's other things, other benefits coming with that. Well, the Georgetown Alliance of Graduate Employees reached a tentative agreement with the university on May 1st. Gage, as it's called, started weekly. They did weekly bargaining sessions all the way back in January. They weren't doing their classwork probably or teaching or prepping for that, but they had these weekly sessions.
Question, Katie. Where is the money for these raises coming from?
I'm going to go with private
stimulus funds?
All that. You just wait till we get to that part. Well, after the negotiations reached a standstill, the union members revitalized the strike efforts on March 3rd when they had a sit-in, because that's what we do. We had a sit-in held in the Intercultural Center to commemorate the first anniversary of contract negotiations with the university.
And what a place to put it, right? The Multicultural Center.
Intercultural.
I know, but multi must be offensive somehow.
Probably.
The Intercultural Center. Yeah, Georgetown, I wish they would just stop calling themselves a Christian university.
I was
They're
waiting
supposed
for
to be
you
a
to rail
Jesuit.
on this.
Yeah,
I was waiting for you to rail.
Yeah, it seems like every week we're doing a story on Georgetown, and they're doing things dumber than before. And so fine. So right, you're going to give these graduate students this kind of money. And what happens when? Here's the thing: if you're going to do this, you're going to pay graduate students that kind of money to get their degree. What happens when they graduate with PhDs and can't get jobs? Don't you have a moral obligation then, Georgetown, to keep paying them $30,000, $40,000 a year? The whole thing is a scam. Graduate schools now, particularly PhD programs, are way oversold. They're way too expensive. And honestly, the number of PhDs getting jobs in academia is so small. You're setting these kids up for failure. And maybe that's what they're doing. They're paying them now, knowing that they're going to spend the next 20 years of their life out of work.
And it's because they can't get jobs in academia, because once you do have, unlike you, but at these elite institutions, once you get that job, if you can score that job, you're never letting it go, because you're tenured, you're going to get paid no matter pretty much what you do. And you can coast all the way till retirement on that, and then get your pension afterwards.
What's interesting is that the virus is now challenging that. In the state of Wisconsin, we're talking about literally firing tenured professors because they're getting rid of programs. They're going. One of the lousiest decisions to make is the one we've made. We're going to use this pandemic to transform the universities into utilitarian places. This campus will be nursing and business. This campus will be STEM. And then watch what happens to the other programs there, right? It's a bad way to do business. It's a stupid plan. And ultimately, in the end, it's all about money.
This is true. And speaking of the money, we know that at least ending 3 years ago, their Georgetown endowment was $1.4 billion. But as you alluded to, the CARES Act gave them $6.1 million. So that $6.1 million in taxpayer funding can go to pay these grad students.
And note this, rather than firing 30, 40, 50, 100 unnecessary administrators at these colleges, they're going to keep them with their fat salaries, and they're going to get rid of entire humanities programs, right?
Well, yes. As the Georgetown University spokesperson told the student newspaper, we are pleased to have reached this tentative agreement with Gage AFT and look forward to the results of their ratification process. We are grateful for the leadership and collaboration shown by both parties in order to reach an agreement in these challenging times.
So 35 diversity officers stay, and the entire philosophy and history department goes. That's literally the plan of some of these schools.
Ah, yes, our next story, back in New York, where last week we talked about New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's plan to reimagine education in consultation with Bill and Melinda Mindy Gates. And Cuomo then decided to announce who's going to be on this council that is going to reimagine the education. And it was basically a little upsetting to all New York City teachers because not a one of them was named to this council.
And that's not an accident. I mean, we've said for years, and we had a great story about it last week, what they're trying to do is get rid of teachers, right? They don't like you, teachers. I got news for you. The educrats who are controlling your destiny don't like you. They don't like the fact that you have some autonomy in the classroom. They don't like you bringing your personal values or your own commitments to the kids. They don't like the fact that not every teacher is the same teacher. And so that's why you're signing your death warrant. Here's another example of it. What Bill Gates and Cuomo are going to do is continue to reimagine schools as teacherless places where only what used to be known as teachers are there to tie shoes or to remember passwords or to take kids on lavvy breaks, right?
Lavvy breaks.
Lavvy breaks.
We're in America, not England.
Watching way too much British
You have
TV.
been watching way too much. All right. Well, so New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio's office and school officials in New York City were quite feisty when they found out that they were excluded because the list of names for the council has 19 names. 19. They couldn't have one out of 19. Some of them include former New York City Schools Chancellor Dennis Walcott, who served under former Mayor Michael Bloomberg, the interim State Education Commissioner Shannon Tahoe, American Federation of Teachers President Randy, with an I, Weingarten, if anyone watched last week's, Randy with an I. There are some school district superintendents, the executive director of New York State's PTA, and some presidents of universities and whatnot, but not a single actual teacher who teaches in New York City, which school district is that big.
Take a note from what I said in the last story, right? At the universities. They're getting rid of entire departments of learning. They're getting rid of actual knowledge-based teachers, and they're replacing them with administrators. That's what this is. Who are all these people? They're admins, right?
Oh, of course they are.
And they got to be admins not because they love your kids. They got to be admins because they're yes men and women. They're go along with the trend women, right?
Yes, they are. Yes, they can. All right. Bill de Blasio's press secretary, Freddie Goldstein, said 1 in every 3 students in the state attends a New York City public school. There is no reimagined education without the interests of our kids and families represented. And of course, they don't care. They don't care.
No,
that's the summary of this entire thing.
It's utilitarian. What they're doing, they're using this crisis to utilitarianize education, which means we're not in this to make your kids excel. We're not in this to make your kids be everything they can be. We're not in this because we're going to treat your kids like individuals who have value. We're going to make this one-size-fits-all education model go much, much bigger. I mean, what they really want is global education. They want all kids being educated the same way in all classrooms across the country every day. That's where they're heading with this. And there'll be one max headroom, for those of you who lived during the 80s. It'll be a max headroom, right? One voice. They'll fit the most nurse ratchety voice they can have will be teaching children the same thing every day.
Creepy. And they've basically announced it as such. So Cuomo wants the council, just sounds so creepy too, the council, to explore several questions around access and use of technology in education, such as how using the cloud can help teachers instruct lecture hall environments, or how technology can help students with disabilities. And Bill Gates' role will be to offer his own expertise and convene national and international experts through it's still unknown, though. What
expertise does Bill Gates have?
In dollars.
I guess being expertise. A filthy rich, radically leftist billionaire and a globalist makes you qualified for it. I'm surprised they didn't bring George Soros.
Ooh, that would have been a good. Well, maybe because they don't. He's getting old. Anyway, the governor's office, of course, did not immediately respond, being like, "Hey, why are there no NYC teachers here?" And the Gates Foundation, they declined to comment. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what really comes of this. It's time now for some real education. Jonathan Swift was a poet, a clergyman, the dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin, and a world-class satirist, essayist, and political pamphleteer. He's most famous for writing Gulliver's Travels, a fascinating tale of travel and the wonderful. It was also filled with savagely accurate accounts of the folly and venality of human nature. Fearing the loss of his mental health all his life, Swift succumbed to dementia and madness before his eventual death in 1745.
And Jonathan Swift is one of our great authors. He's somebody that doesn't get taught as much anymore. Of course, his most famous work is Gulliver's Travels. And it's not an easy read. I mean, of all the eras of the past, the 18th century Enlightenment era, it's not the easiest reading. But boy, Gulliver's Travels is an amazing novel. And one of the things I love about Gulliver's Travels is absolutely brilliant. The first 2 books, in Gulliver's Travels, Swift writes 4 books, right? Lemuel Gulliver goes 4 different places and meets 4 different kinds of people. The first book is all about, of course, the Lilliputians, right? He's huge, they're small. The second book is Brobdingnag, where he's small, they're huge. And it's microscope and it's telescope, right? In the Enlightenment, playing off the amazing things that happened when you got microscopes and telescopes, right? Within the previous couple hundred years. And so what would it be like, Jonathan Swift says, to look at life as if we were incredibly tiny or incredibly large? And the playing with Isaac Newton and his treatise on optics, just amazing stuff. And my favorite book of Gulliver's Travels is the 4th one, where he goes to visit the land of the Houyhnhnms, humanized horses that are virtuous and pure and seek knowledge. And when they learn what it's like to be human in a human world, those animals that serve us so well, when they're in charge, they don't become like we became. It's really a beautiful book. But Swift had a fear of madness his entire life. I mean, it's almost like he knew that's where he was headed. He had such a clear, rational mind, but he was terrified of it. And ironically, that's what happened to him. He lost his mind. It was a horrible thing. In fact, people argue, if you read the last couple of paragraphs, couple pages of Gulliver's Travels, you will see a mind that's starting to really go off the rails. I want to take you to 2 particular quotes. These are not from his novel, but I think they're very useful for our period in time. He says, He once wrote, "It is impossible that anything so natural, so necessary, and so universal as death should ever have been designed by Providence as an evil to mankind." Ah, that's beautiful, right? That if we believe there's any order to the universe, if we believe in any kind of God, then how could that God intend death to us as a negative? It is the doorway we walk through to be with him, to get back to where we should have been before sin. He says it is impossible that anything so natural, so necessary, and so universal as death should ever have been designed by Providence as an evil to mankind. He says, he knew it. He knew he was going to lose his mind. He look at that last sentence. He says, I shall be like that tree. I shall die from the top down, right? He knew it. He knew he would lose his mind before the body went. And that's what they say, right? To have a healthy body and a diseased mind is the worst possible thing. And you go to the next quote from a different place he wrote, but I think it's fitting here as well. He says that the universe was formed by a fortuitous concourse of atoms. I will no more believe then that the accidental jumbling of the alphabet would fall into a most ingenious treatise in philosophy. Love that quote. You know, this materialism that we have today, that we're nothing more than highly evolved animals, that human beings aren't anything special, we don't have souls, there's nothing after death. I love it. The idea that we live in a materialist universe, he says, the idea that the universe was formed by a simply random concourse of atoms, I will not believe that, he says, any more than I would believe that accidentally jumbling up the alphabet, right, using a computer to just randomly throw letters across a screen would eventually fall into the creation of an ingenious treatise of philosophy. He actually nails the question, Swift. Could 1,000 typing monkeys ultimately by accident come up with Hamlet? And the answer is no.
Well, that's a Swifty Tuesday for all of you.
Swiftian.
As always, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you have a question for our Friday Q&A, visit freedomproject.com/askduke or send us a message on social media. Now, to wrap things up with our fun fact of the day, following up on yesterday's fun fact, on this day in history, 1536, Anne Boleyn was executed. She was Henry VIII's second wife and was charged with adultery, incest, and conspiracy against the king. Hrump.
Did you know that she also had she was legendary for having a sixth little finger? She had 5 fingers, and she had a residual 6th one.
Wow.
Right? And what does that tell us? 6 wives, 6 fingers? What does that tell us? I don't think it tells us anything, does it?
I don't want to know what it tells us.
Henry VIII. I'm Henry VIII, I am. Henry VIII, I am. Eminem. And that's going to do it for us this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay a little hermit. Herman's hermits, my friends.